Welcome back to another Loan Officer Life podcast. I have Meg and Jemma with me today. We're going to be talking about new home buyers. So they just wrote a new Rethink book. We all love the Rethink books. I've read two of them, and I now have a third one on my list. But Jemma, Meg, why did you just decide one day to get up and write a book, or what prompted this?
So I have actually for the past couple of years been saying that I wanted to get better at documenting homebuyer stories and homebuyer wins, like where people are actually out there making things happen in interesting ways to become the American dream of home ownership. And when I kind of came across the Rethink books and had the privilege of meeting Kyle early in like spring of 2025, I was like, oh, this is how I'm going to do it. But instead of just a collection of home buyer stories, I wanted to just assemble a bunch of people who were like really interacting on a day-to-day basis, where we're seeing that this next generation of folks, it does want to become homeowners and is making that happen. So I knew this was kind of the way to go. And I was fortunate enough to meet Jemma shortly thereafter.
Yeah. It's one of those things that I never really thought about much until I met Meghan, and then the light bulb kind of went on. I have been really passionate about education through my entire career. And then when I met Meghan and she proposed this idea, it was just like a moment of an aha moment, like, this is perfect. All these years of being passionate about education, and able to put it onto paper with a group of amazing professionals just made sense.
So how did you guys get connected then? Did you know each other before, or was this part of
No,
the
we
project?
met on LinkedIn. Met on like I left Jemma a LinkedIn comment. She had this post that really resonated with me, just about, it was, I actually remember what it was. Like she was talking about all the innovations that people are working on in the mortgage industry that actually don't help the customer, and sort of advocating for the reasons why, the types of innovations that actually make a difference to the consumer. And that was just speaking my language. So I loved it. And we made friends in the LinkedIn DMs.
I
Yeah,
love it.
the new age of making friends in the mortgage business.
It's great. I mean, I think COVID definitely helped us, pushed us, maybe not helped us, but pushed us in that direction. But
Mm.
I found it so beneficial, just connecting with industry peers, of not for just doing business, but just growing relationships.
Yeah,
Mhm.
exactly.
So this, I mean, when I hear this, when the audience hears this is, I think, obviously a lot for first-time homebuyers can take some from this. But when we were talking before, this isn't only for first-time homebuyers. You're simplifying the consumer experience through mortgage. I mean, just helping them. And I think Gemma, you'd mentioned that it was like, if you can read a la carte chapters, you don't have to read from start to finish.
Mhm.
Can you speak a little
Yeah.
more about that?
Yeah, so I think we built the book with the idea that it can speak to any home buyer, not just a first-time home buyer or not just somebody who wants to learn about the home buying process, but anybody who is going through the home buying process, whether they're a first-time home buyer or an experienced home buyer. And as we wrote the book, it evolved into, okay, you can open the book, you can read each chapter independently. It tells a story about its topic and it can be read independently, or you can read the book front to back. And it just really kind of evolved into this kind of journey of preparing to buy a home, buying a home, and then alternative ways to buy a home, which really speak to any home buyer, and making it so that you don't have to sit down and read this 200-page book. You can jump in and read a chapter and jump out and read another chapter at another time. And so we broke it down into 3 sections. The first section is preparing to buy a home. The second section is what that process looks like when you're actually going through the home buying and the mortgage process. And then the third section is hacks, things that we all want to learn about. We've maybe heard about on social media, heard about from talking to friends, but really putting that to paper. And that's where those experienced buyers come in. So they may feel comfortable with the traditional process, but they want some tips and tricks on how to do something unique. So really just speaking to all audiences.
That's great. So I mean, what I love about the Rethink books is there's so many industry colleagues that come in and then speak to us. So how did you guys go about selecting who is going to contribute? Did you do that outline first and set it up and then find your people, or how did that go?
Yeah, we did our outline first. So we knew what we wanted to cover, and then we kind of set out to find the people. I will say there were some people who we already knew immediately when we made the chapter that that was going to be the person. I would say that was especially for some of the folks who aren't loan officers or real estate agents, but some of the people who work for some industry partners like down payment resource. I knew with Brad Cardwell, and he's a good friend of mine. So I knew I was going to call him for that. Same thing with Kat, who works at Loan Sense, or she's the founder and CEO of Loan Sense. I knew I wanted her to do the student loan chapter. Meghan Anderson, who's formerly of MBS Highway, she's moved on now, but I knew I wanted her to do the rent versus buy chapter. So there were a few things like that. Other than that, we had our list, and we just started chatting like, okay, who do you know who would be great for this? And then Gemma and I started just making our phone calls.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's great. So how can a loan officer use this book? Is
I
this
think for
really
a
just for a
loan
consumer?
officer, there are some really, really, really good loan officers who wrote chapters in this book, right? So there's chapters, there's the couple people who are great at communicating what their value is. So I think like if I was a loan officer, I would take this and steal how they do it, right? So Travis Newton is a great communicator, and I know you're going to have him on the podcast. He is an executive or a regional manager at Synergy One, or an area manager. He talks about the value of a local loan officer really, really well. So if you read his chapter, you would say like there's definitely some tidbits and lines you could use to sell being a local loan officer. Brian Wiltman, who is from Embrace Home Loans for my company, he's a $100 million producer, and he talks about how really to help a customer structure an offer in a way that helps them win a bid. And I think that you could steal some of his tips for sure. So I think there's things like that you could use. And also, not everybody, this is a great tool to give out as a piece of marketing material for your borrowers, especially like unless you live in the town with one of our loan officers, you're not really competing with them. So feel free to get it and give it to your borrowers as a pre-approval gift or whatever.
Yeah, I agree. I think loan officers might be hesitant, and they're like, oh, wait, this is written by another group of loan officers and realtors. But it's not your competitor. To Meg's point, everybody's spread out all over the country. And it's just a great way to go in and have a conversation with a realtor saying, hey, here's this really cool tool that makes it fun. And we can pass it out to our borrowers and really educate our borrowers and use it as just a conversation piece with referral partners and potential buyers. And then, just really leaning into what we can learn from each other as peers. To Megan's point, there's just some really great information in here. If you want to learn more about fix and flip, or you want to learn more about self-employed, it really kind of nudges you to start learning about these topics that, certain loan officers have become experts in. And I think that is something that a lot of people in our industry talk about is, what is your expertise? What is your superpower as a loan officer? And these loan officers have all found what their superpower is, or these realtors. And so you can really lean in and listen to what they're saying and maybe spark an interest in what, you want your superpower to be. So it's a great, tool for a loan officer just to read themselves outside of just the marketing piece as well.
Yeah, some of the names you mentioned are definitely leaders in the industry, and love what some of the content, especially I'm just closer to Travis and James, but their contents I love watching. It's just entertaining, but
Yeah,
but it does engage the local community and their local realtor referral partners, and it does it in such like a fun way that's like, oh, it could be silly too, and do some of this stuff, And it's not like they're always silly, but they just have fun with it, and it genuinely looks like they're having fun.
And I met Travis on Instagram just from, I kind of just, again, like Gemma, I ended up just DMing Travis to kind of ask about about his success on Instagram with he and James and like what kind of business they're getting out of it. And so I kind of had just a rapport with him that way. So I knew, okay, I want this guy to be in the book. So that matters. And same thing with Danielle Anderson. I like cold called her off of Instagram because she has an Instagram that's all about house hacking. She's out in Colorado and I found it, loved it, and was like, hey, do you want to do this book? And I was lucky enough for her to say yes.
So let's talk a little bit more about that house hacking, because I know that's one of the themes of the book. What can we elaborate a little bit further on that? Some of the themes in there?
Sure. I think we had, like Gemma just pointed out, the fix and flip. There's a renovation loans chapter with, 203K and the like that Christian Genovese writes. It's really good. She's has great charts and all of that. Danielle has the house hacking short-term rentals. And then, Dave Kretschmar also writes a little bit about different sort of non-QM things that borrowers would be unaware of. I think the house hacking was a little bit of the inspiration for the book. As I kind of write in my forward, my son brought up house hacking with his friends. He was at 24, said, could my friends and I go in on a multifamily home with a FHA 203K loan? I was like, had no idea that people even knew the term FHA 203K loan. So I knew that this next generation, I really have a belief that they will approach home buying differently. They have to, with the affordability and different kind of life changing remote work, different gig economy, all of the above with the Gen Z. So I think house hacking is just a topic that would be interesting to them.
Well, and I feel like maybe house hacking back 10, 20, 30 years ago, I don't want to say it was taboo, but people just didn't talk about it. And now, just like kind of with everything in our world, like what's the unique way to do something, especially with generational living, the affordability piece, and just, finding unique ways to get into a house. And then not just, those types of house hacking, but just I have a unique scenario, my self-employed or, people who need an alternative way to get into a home. And so we kind of look at that as house hacking, but it's more just programs that actually exist and we need to talk about them. Is it really hacking or is it just, kind of a niche in the market? But really digging in and talking about that stuff. And there's some really cool, just real life stories in our book. It doesn't just give you the technical side, it actually gives you real life experiences that are kind of, heartfelt, but also just gets you really excited about what that looks like. And so maybe that'll spark something in a buyer that's like, okay, I can do this, I can fit into this unique mold. And so, really leaning into listening to those stories, I think is a big part of our book as well.
Yeah, that's good. The personal stories, I think, mean a lot, especially for people going through it the first time, hearing of other people's first time experiences. I think what you mentioned about taboo, I wish I would have known more about some of these house hacking type things, because I look back on my first condo that I lived in, coming out of college with a couple of buddies. We could have actually afforded to buy the place, and we would have a much better position after living there 3-4 years. But it was taboo. It was like, no, you can't go in. You have to go in with your spouse or your partner, and that's really the only way to do it. So I'm all for the education and the other opportunities for people to at least entertain, see what's out there. So going back to the beginning part for that first time home buyer, what are some of the top themes coming out of that?
In that
the preparing phase.
In the preparing phase. Well, we have that rent versus buy analysis. We have a chapter obviously about saving for a down payment, and that comes from the Landy Lou, who has founded the Foyer app, which is really the only app I know that's really just about saving for down payment and some of the different benefits associated with that. But he does a good job on that. Pat Holland writes a great chapter about credit and the perspective he took from it. We did ask everybody to kind of give the advice you would want your kids to know, and he just did in a really nice, very personal way of talking about credit and kind of just the basic things you need to do. And especially as the industry changes, when credits, there's a lot going on with credit scores, right? It sort of just breaks down a lot more away from like, you need this FICO to here's what credit means. So that's really helpful. And then we do have Amy Eiler talk about just really being realistic about your what you want out of life, not just how much house you can afford. So kind of the big picture. And I would say Brian View's chapter touches on that as well, talking about, okay, what if you buy a house, forget just the DTI. First of all, there's the payment and then all the expenses that come with it. So Amy kind of phrases it in a what's your big life that you want to lead? And Brian also has some of the nitty gritty around, okay, and then sometimes the basement might flood and you're going to need money for that too. So I think that there's some great tips in there in that early prep section.
Yeah, I think if you're just generally on social media outside of the LinkedIn world, the one thing I always see people post if you're on any sort of like neighborhood or internal mom pages, what do I need to do? Where do I start? And that's like the big question when people think about buying a house. It's like, where do I even start? And there's a whole start that's before just getting pre-qualified. And, this section really talks about that, whether it's savings or credit or really thinking about your budget. That's a conversation that I think any good loan officer is having. And Amy and Brian really break that down. Like, have you thought about what's important to you? Is it travel? Is it going out to dinner every Friday night? Is it being prepared for a hot water heater to break or a roof to be repaired? Really kind of thinking about all those things, budgeting and what does that look like? And I think that that's the first start. I think Brian's used this thought or this phrase a lot, the point of thought, as opposed to the pre-qual. At that point of thought, I need to think about savings, payment, lifestyle, and then I can start thinking about what it means to get qualified, right? And that's your debt ratio and your credit score. And so really that point of thought versus, okay, I'm ready to get pre-qualified. And I think that's the differentiation that people who've never bought a home, they're like, where do I even start? And it's like, you need to start with a budget. Where are you comfortable? What's your monthly payment that you're comfortable with? Taking into consideration your lifestyle, your normal bills and expenses that should come up. And so that was kind of the idea of having those three sections is we don't need to jump right into let's get pre-qualified. We really need to talk about that point of thought and what are all the things from a financial readiness that you need to think about before we get into the pre-qualification.
Yeah, I love Brian's coined that point of thought, but I use it all the time. It's especially, what we do from our technology product, but getting ready. I mean, I am in all these social media, just first time homebuyer forums, just to see what kind of the pain points are. But you hear some of those, the regret of buying right after the first year, but where I extrapolate from what they're saying is they weren't really told as much of that up front before. It was just focused on the mortgage, not these other things. The people that were told get through year one, year two, it's like, okay, we're stable, we're good, we achieved what we wanted to achieve in terms of home ownership. So I think it's really helpful for just people getting educated in that area.
I agree.
Any other last comments for the group? We're going to be posting your book link out and give Jemma and Meg's contact info, but anything else you want to leave the audience with?
I mean, I think my biggest thing is just who is the audience, right? And our book, our audience is everyone. It's not just peers in the industry. It's not just referral partners. It's not just people on LinkedIn. It's not just the Rethink community. It's anybody who is looking for some financial direction with the end goal of buying a house. And so anybody can pick this book up and learn something from it if they're looking to grow their financial readiness. And so, I think about one of the things I've said as a quote in a lot of my social media posts on this. These are the things we didn't learn in school. And I think we all talk about that a lot when it comes to basic financial readiness, whether that's balancing a checkbook or, managing a credit card. And this is really what that book is for. It is for financial readiness. It is for preparedness. It's for learning for anybody, whether they're buying a house today or buying a house in 5 years, or they've bought 3 houses before, they can glean something from this book.
Well said, Jemma.
That was great. Yeah. Well, we really appreciate you guys coming on, Gemma, Meg. Very valuable information for our community. So we appreciate you. We love educating first.
Awesome.
Yes.
Thank you for having us, Chris.